Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I'm your host, Maryann Petri, and there is a rally coming up. DFPS has failed the families of Texas. The Texas Special Committee on DFPS has also failed to hear the families. Now it's time to make your voices heard and surround yourself with those on the same mission as you. This will take place September 21st, 2022, starting at 1 p.m. at 4900 North Lamar Boulevard, Austin, Texas, 78751. I've got some brand new guests on. I have the Patriot Parents on to discuss not only this rally, but they have been fighting DFPS for 3 years. And their victimization has resulted in them being advocates and warriors for the nuclear families of America. And they've got 3 kids involved in this. And this is a lot of corruption we are going to discuss. So I welcome you to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
How did you, I guess, unfortunately get involved in this?
Well, we moved to Texas from an entirely different state. We set foot on Texas soil on March 25th of 2019. And we had gone through the process to get our children enrolled in school. And we finally cleared escrow on our house on April 18th of 2019. And on May 6th of 2019, we had a parent-teacher conference because we wanted to know what our daughter's, where her shortcomings were in class and where she was excelling in class. And we wanted to know these things so that we knew how to best help our child. And so we had this meeting on May 6th. And then 17 days later, CPS came and removed our children. The reason the kids were removed is because my daughter, so we had 2 dogs and we didn't know anything about blue heelers. And when we first saw these dogs, well, at least I didn't know anything about blue heelers. I'm sure my husband knew a little bit more than I did, but we didn't know that they were herding dogs. We didn't know that they were, hyperactive, jumpy. We didn't know any of that stuff. But with 3 kids, we'd have our 3 kids trying to run off in the backyard in different directions, and our dogs would try to rally them together. Well, one day my eldest daughter tripped over our dog, and we had concrete pavers that were just acting as a temporary staircase because there was quite a distance between the threshold of the back door and the ground. Mm-hmm. And so we just had that makeshift staircase, albeit temporary. And my daughter, when she tripped over the dog, she fell on the concrete pavers and got a scrape on her chin and a fat lip. And the same day, my daughter lynched the dog, or that's in my husband's words, but we had a rope that must have been attached to like a tire swing or something on the branch in the backyard. And she threaded the rope through the dog's collar and hoisted her up and started strangling our dog. You wouldn't know it by looking at her, but she is incredibly strong. And, the dog was like 2 or 3 inches off the ground. My son was laughing at her, or laughing at the dog. My husband saw it. He ran outside and he grabbed the kids and brought them in. And there's a lot of people who, when they speak, they're very animated with their hands. There's a lot of hand movement and, to sort of illustrate the story that they are trying to get across. Well, when my husband brought his arms back to say, "What were you thinking?" to our son, he didn't know where our daughter was. And when he brought his arms back, he accidentally tapped her upper lip where the fat lip was and caused it to bleed again. So my daughter, she told us that she didn't want to go to school the next day, and we asked her why. Everybody understands that, of course, when a child gets hurt, if you don't send them to school the next day, of course it's going to raise a red flag. But it's also up to the parents. And when we asked our child why she didn't want to go to school the next day, she said, because she looks ugly. And then it got my brain moving 100 miles an hour because, first of all, I remember when I was a kid, I fell off my bike and I slid on my face probably like 6 feet.
Mhm.
And I had a scrape on my face from the top of my forehead all the way down to the bottom of my chin. And I was forced to go to school, and I did get made fun of.
Mm.
And I'm very dedicated to learning about mental health and to learning how certain actions affect those who have mental health illnesses or anything like that. And I remember how I felt, and it has stayed with me my whole life. I didn't want that for my child, so I opted to keep her home. My eldest daughter's teacher acted outside of her role and talked to my youngest daughter, who is not her student, and asked her, "Where's your sister?" And she said, "Oh, Daddy hit her so hard she hit a wall." And my youngest daughter had just turned 6. And so CPS was called on May 22nd of 2019, and they were taken without a warrant on May 23rd. The CPI, she admitted her own fault through her own words because she claimed immediate danger. But my questions are, how could it have been immediate danger when it took you 24 hours to respond? Immediate danger is when it's happening right then and right there. How could it have been immediate danger when you did not collect my son from the accused prior to going and talking to my girls? Also, how could it have been immediate danger when the accused wasn't even on the premises when you responded?
Well, and on top of that, she also admitted that in her sworn affidavit that started all this garbage, that she also did everything that she could to avoid removal. So she's kind of doing that sky is red, but I see it blue kind of thing, where
Mhm.
she said, I did everything I could, but I had to take him because of immediate danger. And even though I objected to the removal of the children, she still didn't do what the protocol in the
Texas Children's Commission.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Texas Children's Commission handbook says, where if there's an objection by the parent, you must go get a warrant and then come back for the removal. Instead, all she did was just have the cops show up about 30 minutes before, everything finished. But it was just completely backwards. They put the cart before the horse on that one.
Mhm.
Well, here's the other thing too. So not only does the Texas Children's Commission state that if one or both parents objects to the removal of their child or children, DFPS is required to get a warrant. The Texas Constitution states that a warrant must be had prior to searching or seizing anything, as well as the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. In order to search or seize anything, you must have a just cause warrant. On top of that, before there was ever even any court hearing heard or any part of our story heard, she put in her report, I move to terminate rights. On what evidence? On what? And on top of that, she perjured herself 3 times. So in her original report, she stated that first she came to the house and she looked through large paneled windows, which we don't have large panel windows, but even if we had, that's casing, that's a crime.
Mhm.
And then when she was questioned, she said she first came to the house, then she went to the school. She said she was looking through large panel windows and all this other stuff. Then on June 11th of 2019, she was asked by the ad litem attorney, did you go to the house? She stated, no, I didn't go to the house. I went to the school. Then during the trial, she said, first I went to the house, then I went to the school, then I went to the house. She said, I did not see any dogs, and there was no fence around the house. Well, we submitted pictures of our dogs in the backyard, and we submitted pictures of the fence around our house. We submitted pictures of the concrete pavers where our child, fell. And apparently perjury is allowed in this courtroom because the judge, during the trial, she stated this court accepts hearsay. Well, here's my issue with that. You cannot send a human being to jail based on hearsay and no evidence. However, somehow it is within the realm of policy and procedure to terminate parents' rights based on no hearsay or based on hearsay and no evidence.
Yeah.
I fail to see the law, and I fail to see the logistics of that. And what I aim to understand is, how is it that CPS believes, or where do they get the information to believe that they are above the law? They're above, apparently they believe they're above the law, they're above the police, they're above the Constitution, they're above the people. No, they are a completely unconstitutional entity, and everything that they do is violations under the color of law. And they aim to deprive parents of their rights, which is a violation of 42 USC 1983. That's conspiracy to deprive of rights. But when they violate that particular US code and they successfully deprive us of our rights, that's a violation under 18 USC 241 and 242. And yet they do all of this under the guise of protecting children. And I'm starting to believe that the reason they get away with it is because they operate under best interest of the child, or clear and convincing, or crystal ball theories. You know,
You get that all the time. They love to use the crystal ball theory, saying, if you don't do this, this is going to be the consequence.
well, not only that, but fear of future harm is what they use constantly.
Oh, yes. They use that against me. They put it in the family service plan, which we call the ransom note. It's also a notice of slavery, if you really want to consider it that way, because what the family service plan is a certain criteria of actions you
Demands.
must do.
They make demands.
Yeah, they're making demands, such as you got to go to a protective parenting class. You got to go through batterer's intervention, which I'll touch on that in a second. But it's certain criteria you got to meet for them to be satisfied to reunify you with the children. But reunification is never, at least in our area, it's not really what they want. They're going to fight to terminate the parental rights.
And I want to touch on something to kind of go in conjunction with what you said. So our former judge, she either is, well, I know she was, but she either is still or was presiding over the Laura Sanchez Villalon case. Laura Sanchez Villalon is a mother who murdered her 2-year-old son, Frankie Gonzalez. They found methamphetamine in her 2 younger daughters' systems, and the same mother lost her first 5 children due to methamphetamine use. She had her rights terminated to her first 5 children. Somehow, though, this judge thought it was a good idea to allow this mother to maintain her right to her children from jail. So how is it that a drug-using murderer is a fit parent, but parents who move to a place where they want to provide the best life for their children possible, how are those parents who do everything they can, to try to help ensure their children have the best life possible, how are they the criminals? And someone who murders their son, their child, how are they not a criminal? And I there's a couple of other things that I want to touch on right now. So the judge who presided over our case, she's an associate judge. And we looked up the rules of an associate judge. Associate judges do not have the authority to terminate rights. If they want to terminate parental rights, they must get the approval of the magistrate. Well, her signature is the only signature on the final order to have our rights terminated. On top of that, we witnessed her terminating parental rights from the bench when the courtrooms were open prior to COVID. And you'd hear the prosecution call off families' names from the docket. And while she was on the bench, it was parents' rights terminated, parents' rights terminated. She also broke federal law because we recently found out. Now, I want to clarify with your listeners that we never received any documentation throughout the entire case that our son was ruled out. We only found out upon calling the ARIF, which I don't even know what that acronym stands for, but apparently they do administrative reviews. We found out that our son was ruled out. Our son was never returned, and he was adopted out. To me, that is the definition of trafficking. To me, I have full and complete belief that this judge trafficked our son.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, they've gone against federal law and placed all three of our children on public record. When our children were taken, they were all under 8 years old. And my eldest is almost 11 now. So they're still minors, and their names are on public record. During our trial, one of the assistant DAs, I believe is what her title was, had one of the caregivers recite the address in which they were all living. And then after he recited the address, they plastered a half-naked photo of my child live on YouTube. They made absolutely no effort to blur her face. And throughout the entire trial and hearings, they stated the kids' full names throughout the entire trial. These are all crimes, and yet they get away with it. And another thing, we have video evidence of our child telling us they were sexually assaulted at the foster home in Austin. My daughter told us where it was. She called it the CPS's house. She gave the names of 2 big boys. And when I asked her what else they taught them, my daughter showed us with her mouth that they taught them oral sex. And I was a behavioral detection officer with the Department of Homeland Security. I was with the department for 11 years. As a behavioral detection officer, you are constantly aware of your surroundings. Once you're trained to, be aware of your surroundings, it never goes anywhere. And my children were not with us. They were over 1,000 miles away at the time. And, God, I'm sorry. This is so. I'm trying.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. We wanted to submit it for evidence, but we're also not the type of people who are going to submit something as evidence if we are not 100% sure that we are seeing what we're seeing, because we don't want to run the risk of filing a false report or a false claim or anything like that. So we showed this video to experts. We showed it to our therapists, our attorneys. My husband's cousin is a police officer, and we have a friend out here who is also a police officer. And they all told us that you are seeing what you're seeing and you need to submit it as evidence immediately. So we did. It was ignored. They're trying to frame my husband for the sexual abuse because my mother placed false allegations of sexual assault on him that were proven false because the department asked for a total of 3 forensic interviews. 2 forensic interviews were had. They're I don't know how they phrased it. I'm trying to phrase it the way they did. How they didn't uncover anything, right? Is that how I would phrase it?
Okay, so Las Vegas Metro performed the 2 forensic interviews in 2019. One just prior to the sexual allegations and one a few days after the sexual allegations came out. It was testified to that there was nothing of consequence that was stated during those forensic interviews, but that they also tried to get a 3rd forensic interview. Metro turned around and said, no, we're not going to perform a 3rd forensic interview, more likely because they understand that multiple forensic interviews can cause a false memory in a child. So with that being said, they refused the third interview, and they also told the caseworker who was trying to get that third interview that they're not going to prosecute me. So if you ask me, that's kind of an indicator of innocence there, at least of the sexual abuse.
There's another thing I would like to put out there,
Go
if
ahead.
that's okay. So throughout our case, there were so many things that they did that were completely unconstitutional. One of them was they forced me to leave my career with the Department of Homeland Security. I had no intention of leaving my career, but they forced me to leave my career and told me to get a job closer to home, which I did. A few months after I got that job, unfortunately, the COVID pandemic was closing businesses, and my position included. And they forced me to move back to where we moved from, under the guise that the illusory promise, rather, that I would see my children face to face. I was there for 4 months, and I never saw my children face to face. I wasn't even allowed to tell my children that I was there. There was one thing that I did say to my child during one of the final FaceTime meetings that I had with my children, and I was chastised for that in court. I said, there are so many things that I want to tell you, but I can't right now. And the CASA worker and CPS and all of them, they all chastised me for saying that, but no questions were asked as to what I wanted to say to my child. And what I wanted to say to my child was, Mommy's been here this whole time, and they are not allowing me to see you. They don't want me to tell you where I am. They don't want me to tell you what's happening to Daddy. We have tons of recordings of my eldest child begging for her father, absolutely in tears, sobbing for her father. And I'm sorry, but I'm a victim of abuse, and I never once cried out for my abusers. So I don't think any child would cry out for their abuser, but they like to. We had a therapist who said to us from Freedom Reigns, she said, children are like dogs. If you kick a dog or beat a dog, they're going to come running back to you. Children are nothing like dogs. Okay. And I actually found that quite insulting that she would make a correlation between our children or any children and dogs.
Yeah, they love to tout that children who are abused suffer from Stockholm's just automatically, even if it's a one-time thing.
And I just remembered what I actually wanted to say. I'm sorry, honey.
That's okay.
So while I was in Las Vegas, my husband called me, and he was totally inconsolable. It was in regards to the sexual abuse allegations that were falsely reported against him. And I had to show tough love. I said, baby, I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. I don't know how to help you. You need to call someone. And he said, I don't know who to call. And I said, start with the sexual abuse hotline. So he contacted the sexual abuse hotline, which resulted in a 45-minute phone call and an agreement to meet in person the next day. My husband showed the young lady the evidence of the video of my child talking about the sexual abuse, and in addition to other things, which resulted in a summary of findings. The lady at the sexual abuse hotline changed his status from the accused to the victim, and she said that she believes he's innocent, that she viewed all the evidence, and there's no doubt that it happened in the foster home. Well, the judge didn't even open the envelope, and she just threw it out. So, for 3 years, I've been on the phone almost every day contacting state leaders. I have even contacted state leaders in other states. But I have contacted an alphabet soup of agencies. When I went to report the sexual abuse from the foster home on my own, I ended up having to go through 3 different law enforcement agencies. I contacted Metro because our children were in their jurisdiction, and that's what I thought I had to do, was contact Metro to report it. They asked, did it happen here? And I said, no, it happened in Texas. They said, you need to contact your local police department. So I contacted our very most local police department, and they said, well, did it happen in our city? I said, no, it happened in Austin. And they said, you need to contact Austin. So I contacted Austin PD and I reported it. The officer that I reported it to then gave it to a detective, and we had a couple of correspondence. I think it was like 1 or 2 phone calls and an email. And it just so happens that this was going on, mid-December. And I received an email from the detective who was on the case, and he stated, I have confirmed that there is no evidence that this happened in Austin. Good luck to your family. So we're closing the investigation, pretty much is what he said. I have a copy of the email, and unfortunately, I don't know how to go into my email without closing Zoom. But how can he say that there's no evidence that it happened in Austin when the CPI testified that she took the kids to a foster home in Austin, and I have the video of my child?
Well, and also you have to make it known that he also emailed you stating that, hey, look, it's Christmas season. I'm going to have to get back to you after the holiday. And he just did not have
motivation, I guess.
Any sort of motivation or sense of urgency with this report. So it kind of leads one to believe that the police, CPS, therapists, doctors, schools even, are all in collusion to pretty much have a cash for kids kind of thing going on, especially with the civil courts. Civil courts will violate your rights and not even bat an eye. Such as with us during our civil trial. We were on a Facebook interview with a CPS Horror Stories, and they violated our First Amendment by bringing that interview into the civil trial and using it against us, asking us questions like, how would your children feel if they were to see this? How don't you think it's wrong for you to be talking about the children in such a fashion? When all we were doing was getting these allegations out, creating an awareness, asking for help.
Which is our right to do.
And through our right to free speech, through our right of freedom of press, we went and sought help through that avenue. And they even turned around and threw it back at us to make us look worse. So whatever you do, CPS is going to use it against you in retaliation even.
There's one other thing I want to add, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
So the goal of CPS is not to reunite the family. They claim that in their handbooks, but they also claim that they don't need a warrant to remove children, provided they don't violate the fundamental rights of the family. Okay, well, first of all, going back to us exercising our First Amendment right, there's also, I have it in my phone. Again, I don't know how to, I want to read it to you guys, but I don't know how to pull it up without exiting out of here. But there's also a law in the Texas Constitution and the Bill of Rights for the state of Texas that people have the right to freedom of press. And, they're not only violating, the U.S. Constitution, they're violating their own state laws. And you're not supposed to, if a parent exercises their First Amendment right, there is a case precedence out there that you cannot retaliate against a parent for exercising their First Amendment right if their goal is to ask for help. Well, that was our goal because we had every single door slammed in our face. And so I don't know. It's just,
Well, it seems like they use these laws and they just twist them around to their own benefit.
Yes.
that's
To
exactly what they do.
Right, and that's what they do, and they maintain the false narrative so they can make money off your children.
Yeah.
Yes. And we want to help parents understand that they will tell you they don't need a warrant. They will tell you you can't record them. They will tell you, they have the authority to take your children. No, they do not. If they tell you to look at their handbook, yeah, read their handbook. Yes, definitely. But their handbook is not the law. Their handbook is a policy. And if you do a little bit more research, you will see that CPS calls us parents their customers. The word
Mm.
customer insinuates that you are a patron somewhere trying to make a purchase, or you are inquiring about something you could purchase. That is you making the decision to purchase something. When they write these family plans, this is a form of slavery and ransoming your children, because they'll use statements like, all you have to do is finish the family plan and you'll be able to either get your kids back or see your kids again. They have absolutely no intent.
But yet they'll put a bread and butter statement inside that family plan saying that if these actions continue, it could result in serious injury or death of the child.
Yes. And another thing I wanted to bring, I'm sorry about this. It's very hard for me to not ramble. I have very severe PTSD from
Mhm.
this, and Maryann, you and I have spoken several times, and you know that I motor mouth a lot. um,
It's
so
okay.
I just would like to apologize to your audience for that. But one thing that we want to bring awareness of is that the parents have far more rights than they think they do. And the reason these people get away with their crimes is because, speaking for myself, I mean, when this first started, number one, I didn't know my rights. I
Mhm.
didn't know my children's rights. Even if you have never had CPS involved in your life, immerse yourself in your rights, because you have more rights than you think. And if more parents stood up for their rights, the less likely it would be for these people to continue to commit their crimes against children.
Mhm.
And what we want to do is, there's a lot that my husband and I are talking about that we want to work on. One of the things we want to work on is to stop the funding to
Mhm.
DFPS, because the funding is what is creating this incentivization of removing our children. If you were to read the ASFA, or Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997, that was enacted by Bill Clinton, you would see just how unconstitutional that is. CPS gets paid to remove your children, so they do it
Mhm.
for money. But then you've
Exactly.
also got Title IV, which also further incentivizes the removal of our children. And I've done a little bit of studying on Title IV, but I've also, my husband has been researching CAPTA, and I don't know a lot about CAPTA. My husband stepped out for a second. But, oh, here he is.
It's brand new. I don't even know everything.
Yeah, we need to
Mhm.
further research CAPTA, but CAPTA also is harmful to parents and children. And these are the things that we need to fight to have removed, because I'm going to let you know right now, our children are not paychecks. And we, the parents of America, do not co-parent with the government.
No.
Our children is not all encompassing of every state leader and every family in this country. Our children is we the people's children. And this common use of our children, it needs to stop. Because
Mhm.
what that does is, if somebody who has no tie to the children via family, friendship, or whatever, uses the term our children, it gives them the sense that they have the power to make decisions for children that don't belong to them.
Yes,
Mhm.
and that's actually a point I want to make, is they blur the line between, actually, they blur the line on who is the state. Well, if we look at the actual definition of that, the state is the people. It's even said in the Constitution, we the people.
Mhm.
So how they blur the line is they'll say state against so-and-so in a court case. Well, what they're referring to as state is the representation aspect of it through the legal and administrative aspect of the government. And they claim that they are the state. So they will oppress the parents, they will oppress the children as a state entity, and they will violate your rights. Literally, they'll violate the children's rights, even when the children beg and plead to come home. They're not going to let that happen because it's not part of their agenda. Their
Mhm.
agenda is to make that federal money off of Title IV. And
Did I make you forget?
yeah, it's a racket. But I have to give some kudos to the Texas State Senate. They have been getting some testimony, but they haven't touched on the parents. That's
Mhm.
where they have failed the parents. They have not heard us. They have not made a schedule. They did have an email request for parents to send in their stories, but it's only for a report. So they have to take what's in a small little black and white snapshot and put it into a report. That's not good enough. They need to get the actual feel of
Mhm.
what these parents went through and really understand the oppression that's happening by this unconstitutional and rogue agency that is CPS.
And there's one thing I would like to add. For any Coloradans who are listening, please forgive me. I don't remember uh, the seat holder's title. Um, I can't remember if it's Laura or Lauren, but Bobert. I watched a video with her in it, and she was absolutely amazing. I have never heard a leader state, the people give consent to be governed. We give consent, which means we are allowing you to govern us.
Mhm.
She, I don't know verbatim, but basically she was saying we are not their rulers. We work for them. And to hear a leader say that, it for me, and which I hope it was for everyone, it was so empowering
Mhm.
to hear someone in office have no fear to say that. And she's absolutely right. We are not subjects, okay? And
Mhm.
we are not under rule. You know, we are independent. And I'm very, very passionate about the people of our country, and I'm very passionate about wanting to ensure that the American people are treated fairly. I went to a town hall on November 8th last year for one of my congressmen. And I remember a few years ago, there was so much talk about wanting to remove God from the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mhm.
And I said, there's all this focus on wanting to remove God from the Pledge of Allegiance when what you should be removing is with liberty and justice for all, because our liberties are trampled daily and the justice system has completely failed the people. There was a senator, now I'm semi good with history, but dates when it comes to history, I'm not so great with. But there was a senator, his name was Henry Clay, and he stated the arts of power and its minions are the same in all countries and in all ages. It marks its victim, denounces it, and incites the public odium and hatred to conceal its own abuses and encroachments. Now, to me, reading that, it was pretty eye-opening to me because it's very true. And there's so much change that my husband and I want. And we believe that if we are not fighting for change, we're doing nothing for our children. Mm-hmm. And we believe that we want to help every single person, mother, father, child, who has been abused by this rogue agency that aims to terminate parents' rights. And it's important that everybody understands that no one is exempt. Not one person is exempt. There's a common misconception that that minorities and people who suffer poverty are the vast majority of who CPS goes after. There is a large majority in those communities, yes, that get attacked by CPS, but they attack sheriffs. There's a sheriff out of Arizona. I don't know if I'm comfortable mentioning his name, but there's a sheriff in Arizona who is suffering with CPS. There is a father here who is a former Leo, and he is being denied his right to see his son who is, dying of cancer in hospice. And it's the judge and the ex-wife who is working against him. There's another father out here who is dealing with a case where the judge is trying to push gender transition. And this judge also issued a gag order on him to prevent him from running for office. That's completely unconstitutional. Gag orders in general are completely unconstitutional, yet these judges get away with it every single day. Mm-hmm. One thing that I do want to fight for, and I have mentioned, is that if a judge has discretion, they should not have absolute immunity. If they have absolute immunity, they should not have discretion. And under no circumstances should they ever have both. Because what that does is it gives them the opportunity to play God in their courtroom, which renders justice for the people completely non-existent in their courtroom. It's a complete disqualification of justice for the people. So
I know when you were talking earlier, the Texas Family Code, Title 5, Subtitle B, Chapter 151, 151.003, Limitation on State Agency Action. A state agency may not adopt rules or policies or take any other action that violates the fundamental right and duty of a parent to direct the upbringing of a parent's child. But yet they do whatever they want.
They do whatever they want because they believe they're above the law.
Yes. And even Governor Abbott stated that the parents are the primary. Yeah, parents are the primary decision makers in every aspect of the children's life. So, and that's another way that CPS violates the parents' rights in regards to their children as well. Because once the children are removed, you don't have any say.
Nope.
With CPS.
Nope.
Good instance is her mom had the kids since June 11th of 2019, which was also a conflict of interest because she was the main informant.
And accuser.
And an accuser. But she wanted to take the kids out for my son's birthday that same year. And I out of school a day early just to take them down to California. And I objected to that. I said, no, school's more important. Why take them out for a day just to take a trip? That's not right. I even told him that. And
Mhm.
all the caseworker said was, well, maybe they need a break. They've been through a lot. And I said, no, school is most important. And I said, you're going to do what you're going to do. She's going to do whatever she's going to do. And look, this ain't right. And I told her, I just hope you tell her what I said. And she still ended up taking the kids out of school for one day, took them down to California, and pretty much took them to the beach. Stuff that we were supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not only that, but she raised holy hell when we were moving here, because we were moving here in March, which, yes, is during the school year going on. But we moved here in March, and there's reasons that we moved. It's because, first of all, I don't know if anybody remembers, but in 2018, from 2018 until it was December 22nd, I believe, of 2018 on into February of 2019, there was a government shutdown, and you had several employees who were able to go on furlough and stuff, but then you had the essential employees who were required to come in and work without pay. During that time, the landlord of the house we were renting at the time, they were on the brink of violating the renter's agreement and wanted to sell the house out from under us. Well, Nevada is constantly inflated. Home prices are astronomical. Rental prices are even more. And the only way that we would have been able to afford to stay there was if we had moved our children into one of the most dangerous parts of town, which there was no way on God's green earth we were going to do. No way. So for 2.5 years, I had researched Texas, and I found that the cost of living, it was affordable. The schools were great. You were able to get get a home that you could afford with a great backyard. And that's what we wanted. We wanted the kids to have a backyard where it was their space to do whatever they wanted to do in the backyard.
Mm-hmm.
So we moved here because we were able to afford it. Before we left, my mother took me out to breakfast, and she said, I'm going to get those kids back one way or another. And then after the first hearing that we had on June 11th, I came home and I was literally catatonic. I could not move. I laid on the couch. I was praying to God that he would bring the house down and crush me. And my mom started out compassionate. She said, when you start feeling this way, you can't let yourself go like this. When you start feeling this way, start doing something productive. And I don't know what it was. I felt like she was opening the door to be, a mom. And I said, I just don't understand why this is happening. I'm devastated. We would never harm our children. We miss them. And she said, well, now you know how I felt when you guys left. Karma's a bitch, huh?
Oh, whoa.
Yep.
Whoa.
My own mother. And then, when we were in court, she defamed me by saying Emily wouldn't know a dangerous situation if it was staring her in the face. Well, I wouldn't have been an employee with the Department of Homeland Security for 11 years if I didn't recognize a dangerous situation. On top of that, my mother was, during the court hearing, oh, it's so hard with 3 children. It's just so hard. And, of course it's hard. She has more money than we did. And yeah, we had to get some help, but they awarded my mother child support from both of us. I wasn't even the accused, but they awarded child support to my mother from my husband and myself. And the judge wanted me to pay half of my monthly salary, which I was part-time, which
They,
left me with $400 something a month.
they do this all the time.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
I'm so sorry.
out to Las Vegas, they left you with nothing.
Yeah, they moved me out to Las Vegas. I had no money, no job, no car, no place to live, nothing. They told me to go to Las Vegas, and I did. because while it's 100% true, I made the mistake of saying I would do anything for my children. I don't care what it is. I would sacrifice it all for my children. And I told them that. And of course, they used that. So having no place to live, I had to ask my best friend if I could come and stay with her. And I always feel like crap because I don't like to rely on other people. I don't like to, be a burden on other people, but my best friend, she's been my best friend for 30 years. She is one of the most wonderful people, and she's so gentle and kind-hearted, and they let me stay with them for the first 2 months. And then I had to ask another friend, a former coworker. She's also one of the sweetest people. And she let me stay with her for 2 months, and she was very understanding that I didn't have a job or a car, but my mother-in-law was kind enough to purchase my food for me. And as my gratitude for her letting me stay with her, I cleaned her house for her. I kept her house 100% clean and, did what I could to help her out. Because I feel bad. I don't like to be a burden on people. I hate that. I even have so much trouble asking for help. Like during the shutdown, somebody told me that I should apply for food stamps and things like that. And I said, well, what if there's someone else who needs it more than I do? I'm taking their spot, and they're saying, look, you're not getting paid. You have your own family. And I said, yes, but I also have family who's willing to help. I don't want to take someone else's, opportunity from them. So, but, yeah, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but, we've also found a whole lot of violations in my husband's criminal case. The judge in his criminal case has aided the department in violating my husband's Sixth Amendment right, as well as the Michael Morton Act, because the department wanted to bar my husband from viewing the evidence against him, which it's against the Sixth Amendment. It's also a neglect of duty according to the Texas Bill of Rights. But the Michael Morton Act is essentially, it is in Texas. It's a Texas act, but essentially it's like the Brady Law that an accused has the right to view the evidence against them. But his attorney is also denying the fruit of the poisonous tree. His attorney is saying DFPS did not violate your rights. He's also saying that the CPS case has no bearing on the criminal case. If that's a fact, then why do you need evidence from the CPS case in the criminal trial? My husband also has been denied his right. He has a right to be heard according to the Texas Bill of Rights. He has a right to be heard either by himself or by counsel or both. And he requested an emergency hearing, and his attorney has denied to get him that emergency hearing. His attorney has also stated a couple of things that I just completely disagree with. He said that our evidence is bullets compared to the bombs that CPS has. However, his attorney also admitted that CPS only has hearsay. But when you call my daughter's video allegations of sexual assault in the foster home a bullet, that's an insult to my child, and I do not tolerate that. His attorney has also given my husband a predetermined outcome, stating you are going to get 2 consecutive sentences of 10 years. He's basically saying he's not going to fight for him.
That's crystal ball theory again.
Yes, he's basically saying that he's not going to fight for him. And yet this same attorney, when he first was appointed to my husband, said the assistant DA did not like how low your bail was set for, which was $10,000. So she tacked on another, so she raised it to $30,000 and tacked on another charge. And put out another warrant. When my husband was arrested on April 9th of 2020, there was no warrant present. He was not Mirandized. And on the same day, they violated his Second Amendment and confiscated his firearm without a warrant to do so. According to Will, all but one officer was in civilian attire. He did not see any body cams. And he was arrested on the word that there was a warrant. Even to this day, he's never seen a warrant. You know, and I mean, we have.
That's a 14th Amendment violation.
Yeah, he says that's a 14th Amendment violation. But there's also a law in the Texas Bill of Rights and Constitution that that protects against that, and yet no one enforces these laws. You know, we have a friend whose husband, she and her husband are Navy veterans, and her husband was proven innocent in their civil case. And even though he was proven innocent in their civil case, they sentenced a man who fought for our country to 162 years in prison on hearsay.
So they get away with whatever.
They get away with whatever they want.
And they continuously build more prisons.
Yes, and I have made it a point to say, because our leaders have known about this here in Texas for over 2 decades, and nothing has been done. And there was an incident in Bastrop County where caseworkers are being charged with child trafficking because they took pictures of 2 naked minors and sold them on Cash App for drugs and money. If our leaders would have acted 20 years ago, these crimes would not have continued. And these crimes are what led up to the Bastrop County incident. But child trafficking is not isolated to Bastrop County. It's everywhere in this state, much less the country. We call CPS the inventory collectors. The people's children are their inventory.
And it's just, no, you're fine. It's like, this is also like just a worldwide child trafficking mess.
It's bad in Canada. It's bad in the UK. It's bad in Australia. It's bad globally.
And actually, to show that it is a huge problem in the U.S., not too long ago, I would say like a couple months ago, I spoke to a couple parents who are out of Florida, and their case is messed up. CPS took their son, called the U.S. Marshals on the parents, got them arrested. While they were arrested, their son was murdered so they could harvest his organs. And that's just a very, very quick watering down of the case. There's a lot more to it. But those were the big takeaways that I got from it. I mean, what did they do to necessitate U.S. Marshals being called on them? And why murder a child to harvest the organs? Well, I got more on that. I mean, this rabbit hole goes deep and it gets dark.
Well, even in the state of Missouri, close to 1,000 or over 1,000 foster children went missing, and no one went looking for them either.
Oh yeah, and Texas isn't very different. We've had 2,000 go missing just in between 2020 and 2021.
I don't know, but I can add something in conjunction with that, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
There was a committee hearing. I don't remember the date that it was, but it was this year. There was a committee meeting, and the commissioner for DFPS was asked how many children were in state care. She said 2,500. Well, according to an article that was updated in January in KSAT News, which I'll send you the link, it says there were 15,000 children in state care as of January of this year. So what happened to the other 12,500 lives that she's charged with protecting? What happened to them? You know, and she was asked on March 17th, how long are these children in these facilities? She said 72 hours. Then why were my children there for 20 days? Why
Mhm.
was it why were they not checked on? Because it was testified that they weren't even checked on. And that's where they were sexually assaulted. And I 100% believe my child,
Mhm.
because we've done the research on the foster homes out here in Texas, and children are more likely to be abused, both sexually and physically, drugged, and murdered in the foster homes here. We last I read, now granted, I can't find the website now, so please don't quote me on the viability or or whether or not it's reputable. But we read that Texas ranks 4th in the nation for the most child deaths in foster care, most child abuses, most child drugging.
So far this year, there's 34 children that died in CPS care, and that completely overshadows how many died between 2020 and 2021. So we're already double the amount of child deaths in foster care
Mhm.
than any other time before. And that needs to stop.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah,
Uh,
and they just don't care. And they'll call that their caseload is too heavy
mhm.
to check on these children.
It's
No, they
because
just don't. They don't care.
it's because they're
Mhm.
removing children uh, uh, like they're candy, you know.
Mhm.
They were talking about CWAPs, which is children without placement. That's what that acronym stands for.
Mhm.
Well, there's an article written in the Houston Chronicle, I believe, that was talking about how 237 children were sleeping in DFPS offices. And then they go and they talk about CWAP. Well, if they didn't abuse their discretion, and if they didn't remove children for no reason on a constant basis, there wouldn't be that kind of issue. There is no reason a child should be sleeping in a DFPS office because they were stolen from their good parents. You know, and it's important that we bring the word out that just because there is CPS involvement does not mean that the parents have abused their children.
Mhm.
You have people who will weaponize CPS. For
Mhm.
example, we've heard from people that if a neighbor doesn't like their neighbor who has children, they will call CPS on their neighbor, and CPS will run with the allegations, the false allegations.
And
Mhm.
actually, what we need to do is bring back the enforcement of the False Claims Act, because even ex-spouses will, and this is very prevalent here in Texas, ex-spouses will call CPS on the person who has sole custody of the children and say, hey, look, they're abusing them, so they can get some custody of the child. Um, so, and that's the problem. That brings up another problem, is DFPS does not really do the footwork necessary to rule out or verify whether or not abuse actually happened. They'll take the hearsay and run with it.
Oh, yes.
And
Oh, yes.
and even in the case of the sexual abuse allegations against me, uh, they, yeah, uh, sorry, um, even in that case of the sexual abuse allegations against me, they swore up and down that they believed our eldest daughter, yet they never heard it from her. They heard it from my mother-in-law.
Mm.
And I even challenged a caseworker when a second set of sexual abuse allegations came out on me after our case was done.
Mhm.
They said that my younger daughter put the same exact allegations against me. And I asked him, hey, did you actually speak with her? He said, yes, over FaceTime. Okay, did she show the camera around the room, or are you just taking her, uh, taking it off the assumption that my mother-in-law is not in there? He said, oh, I had her show the camera around the room. I take that as a
Mm.
lie,
Mhm.
because when the children are with my mother-in-law, I know for a fact that just being there, that's enough of a coercive influence on my child.
Mhm. Oh,
And
yes.
then I asked him, I challenged him. I said, are you legally able to perform legal investigations, lawful investigations? And he said, well, I'm an investigator. And he kept kind of dodging that fact.
Mhm.
And then lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, my wife gets a closed investigation letter, but by law, I'm supposed to get one. I never got it. But in that closed investigation letter, it says they could not determine with my eldest daughter, who they swore up and down they believed, but now they believe my younger daughter.
What my husband has forgotten to mention is when he was talking to this, it was a CPI. When he was talking to the CPI, he invited this CPI to come to the house and review my daughter's video of sexual abuse allegations. He never showed up. And if I would have been on the phone with him, because he said, well, I believe the child, I would have flat out asked him, okay, if she would have told you what happened in the foster home, would you have believed her?
Mhm.
He never came to review the evidence. He just filed the claim. And so now the other thing both of us have forgotten to mention is that it was testified in court that the only person they heard any allegations from was my mother. They never heard them from my daughter. And we have medical records that state that the kids told the doctor daddy would never hurt us. We have recordings of our children begging for their father. I have a video of the second physical visitation we had right after the removal. In the video, I'm holding my daughter. She's sitting on my lap. And I can't remember if I was resituating my person or if I was trying to reach for something. I have to review the video. But either way, I had my hand on her back. And as I was leaning, I was kind of carrying her like monkeys do in nature with their babies.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden she screams, yeah, ow, ow, ow. And I said, what's going
Mhm.
on? And my daughter said, oh, she just scratched herself, mommy. And my son said, no, it's her bruise. So I laid my daughter like on her belly across my lap, and I raised the bottom of her shirt to the nape of her neck, and I lowered the waistband to the just above her butt crack so nothing was revealed. My eldest daughter counted all the bruises that were on her back that looked like finger marks, and then there was a huge purple bruise on her left butt cheek, upper left butt cheek.
Mm.
So, and then the very first visit, we did a video memo of it. My eldest child smelled like urine from head to toe.
Mm.
Her hair was crusty. They smelled like their teeth hadn't been brushed. They were wearing dirty clothes. My daughter's legs were covered in bruises, and I asked her, where did those bruises come from, baby? And she said, it's just wasps, mommy. It's just wasps. No, her legs were lined with bruises, and some of them were really long. They looked like somebody was grabbing her on her leg. And I just, I don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do. I have nightmares almost every single night. I have nightmares. I had one nightmare after they were first taken where I was paralyzed, and I was begging the caseworker not to take my children, and she had this really unsettling smile on her face, and I'm on my knees on the floor begging her not to take my children, and my children were saying, bye mommy, bye mommy, bye
Mm.
mommy. And she's just got this evil look on her face, and then she said, your kids will be taken care of, your kids will be happy. I had another night. I don't know what's going on, but I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but my nightmares start when I'm half awake and half asleep.
Mhm.
I had one recently. Uh, we live near bridges because, we live by the lake. So we live near bridges. And I was on the road side of the bridge, and my little boy was on the water side of the bridge. And my son was on the water side of the bridge, and I couldn't save him. He fell off the side of the bridge. I always have dreams where I'm trying to save my children from falling. I've had dreams where I'm desperately holding on as tight as I can, and my kids are hanging. One of my kids is hanging off of a cliff. I had another really weird dream recently. For some reason, my mother was in it, and we were at this party, and I was spending time with my daughter, and she said, "Can I go play?" And I said, "Well, I kind of want to spend time with you." So she asked my mom, and my mom let her go play, and I chewed my mom out for it. And she said, "Fine, I'll go get her." And I followed her, and there was this weird room where all these kids were tied up by their wrists facing the wall. And there was this 2-year-old child who couldn't reach the floor and was hanging by their wrists. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't mean to like pour all this out.
Well, this is what a parent goes through when the government enters your life. And what we're doing is we're trying to make people aware that if it can happen to you, and it happened to me, it can happen to anybody. And you're really doing a lot of good work because, you're going to start this 501c4, tell me about that.
So my husband and I want to start a 501c4. It would be called the Family Justice Committee. The reason we want to do a 501c4 is because if I read it correctly, there's a limit to how much lobbying you can do under a 501c3. However, with a 501c4, there's no limit. And what we want to do is we want to liaise between the families who are being victimized and DFPS. Because as it sits, from what I'm seeing anyway, I haven't found anything that says otherwise yet, but from what I'm seeing is we have one judge in this state who is steadfast in standing up for the families and holding DFPS fully and completely accountable for their actions. But one judge is not enough. And if we were to be a liaising, that's really hard to say, but if we were to be a liaising community for the families, we intend to raise money so that every few months we would have enough funding to fund a full trip for our members and staff to go to these meetings, these town halls in various states all across the country, so that we can be heard all across the country, but also give other families from every other state the opportunity to be heard. And we want to be there to help families, because no child, no family should ever have to go through what we have gone through, what the hundreds of thousands of other families have gone through. It is abhorrent. And when they are accusing us of child abuse, they're accusing us of the very things they are doing to our children.
Most definitely. It's you gave me 2 quotes from the King James Bible, and one of them is something. One of them I just hold it to my heart. But this one here: if a man is found kidnapping any of his brethren of the children of Israel and mistreats him or sells him, then that kidnapper shall die, and you shall put away the evil from among you. Deuteronomy 24:7. And I think, judges should be listening to this, as well as, but whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the sea. And that's Mark 9:42. And, these child abusers in black robes, as well as CPS, really should be listening up. And I'm
Yes.
very proud of you for coming forward. And I know I'm going to have you back on because of this rally that's going to be taking place. Again, this rally will be in September 21st, 2022, starting at 1 p.m. at 4900 North Lamar Boulevard, Austin, Texas, 78751. And, I just want everyone to know to join in, because these people are criminals stealing and selling our children.
Thank you, Maryann. And if I may close with a quote by Johnny Cash.
Please do.
If anyone has heard his song, God's Gonna Cut You Down, there is one verse in there that we should all take heed to. And it says, you can throw your rock or hide your hand, working in the dark against your fellow man. But as sure as God made black and white, what's done in the dark will be brought to the light. And we aim to bring that quote into fruition.
Mm-hmm.
We stand with the families, we stand with the children,
Mm-hmm.
and we will continue to fight for our own, and we will continue to fight for you. There's no fear in speaking the truth and speaking up. Let your voices be heard and come to the march in Austin in September, and let your voices be heard.
And thank you so much for coming on the show. And I want to have you on before that, and also after as well. But don't jump off, okay? Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Maryann Petri, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with the Patriot Parents and other exciting guests. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you.